Minister, we got a lot of visitors today, and just allowing them to settle. You must be the big attraction, Minister. I think we've done good. Good afternoon, Minister, and gentlemen, thank you for coming to help us with our inquiry on forensic science and criminal use of forensic science in criminal justice system. We do appreciate you're busy today, Minister, so thank you indeed for coming. Just for the record, if you don't mind, starting with you, Minister, if you say who you are and what position, just for the record, and then your colleagues can introduce themselves.
Nick Hurd, Minister for Policing.
I'm Professor John Aston. I'm the Home Office Chief Scientific Advisor and also Professor of Statistics at the University of Cambridge.
And my name is Christoph Prince. I'm Director of Data and Identity in the Home Office.
Thank you very much. Minister, do you have anything to say to start with, or shall we move on to the questions straight away?
No, other than thanking you for a welcome diversion from Brexit and actually just to signal without wanting to be flippant that actually what we're discussing in the next hour is extremely important because a fully functioning forensic science market is very important to our criminal justice system and public confidence in it. We have significant problems that we are trying to manage, and I very much welcome the spotlight that this committee will throw on it and some of the recommendations that I hope will flow from your report. So I'm, for a number of different reasons, I'm pleased to be here.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and your opening comments are absolutely welcome. It's music to our ears that you look forward to our report, and we'll do our best to try and be helpful in taking forward the forensic science and its use. If I may start with Lord Griffiths, please.
I'd like to ask you the question which has come up through a number of witnesses, which is really the role of the market as opposed to the role of the public sector in provision, and whether particularly you feel that the market has destabilised private provision.
I recognise there is instability in the market, and I've been very candid up front in recognising that there are a range of quite complex problems that we now have to manage, and that's why I commissioned a review in March 2018 because I wasn't satisfied that the House was in order. But, Lord Griffiths, to your question as to what the underlying kind of driver of the problems here, to date my view is that it's not necessarily structural in the sense of we have these problems as a result of having a market, or we have these problems as a result of moving off a predominantly single supplier model, which I know some would like to go back to. I have an instinctive belief in the markets and in competition to drive standards and reduce costs. So that would be my philosophical position. I don't see any hard evidence to suggest that moving to a sort of mixed provision model is at the core of some of the problems we're trying to manage. Indeed, when I look at some of the data around the original single supplier model and I see how it struggled in terms of financial stability, it was, I think, losing £2 million a month before its close, and I look at some of the problems that it had in terms of the need for retesting and everything like that. I'm not persuaded that at the heart of the problems that we'll go on to discuss is a deep-seated structural problem, i.e. that we have the wrong model of provision. I just can see a fragility in that system that flows, I think, fundamentally from not enough value attached to it from those commissioning.
Not enough funding.
And that is, and therefore stabilising the market is my priority. Changing the model is not my priority at this moment in time.
Can I just ask, in the Home Office evidence to us, they stated that one problem is that it's near capacity at present, and secondly, that there are high barriers to entry. And I wonder how you rated those, and if you felt they were concerns, what you would be proposing to do.
I'm happy for Christophe or John to come in on that point. As the minister viewing this, what I see is obviously prompted by corporate failure, is evidence of a system that has been too fragile, and with, I think, insufficient, what I would call market management or supervision, insufficiently clear lines of responsibility for that, and a system of procuring services that has driven down costs to levels that have threatened the sustainability of the organisations that we rely on to provide an incredibly important service to the criminal justice system. So those, to my mind, in terms of what I've heard from the police and what I've heard from experts in the field, have been the primary issues that we have to address, and that's reflected in what we've done since in terms of supporting the police reaction to that. But Christophe, do you have anything to add in terms of some of the structural issues that Lord Griffiths has?
Yeah, so on the question of capacity, so on the question of capacity and high barriers to entry, I think it is a feature of the market of forensic science. There are long lead-in times for the development of the expertise that you have, and therefore to build capacity takes some time. And one of the questions that is about giving enough visibility and long-term visibility to market players so that they can build that capacity and also that we don't lose it. So I think, again, it's a feature of any structure in forensic science where you have expertise that needs to be built up over some time.
Thank you.
Okay. Lord Fox, you wanted to come in?
Well, just coming in on the market, my understanding is that you've got the police, depend in different police areas, but you've got the police providing the lion's share of the forensic in many police authorities. Is that what you intended in terms of creating the market? Is that the right balance? What is it you're actually seeking to achieve in market terms when you've actually got the captive market providing most of the service?
I think the intention at the time, I wasn't involved in the decision making at the time, which seems a long time ago. The intention was to move off a predominantly single supplier model with the risks attached to that model in terms of risks to resilience, risks to efficiency, to more of a mixed provision model, including private investment. I don't recall there being sort of hard targets or clearly articulated aspirations in terms of the balance of provision. But correct me if I'm wrong, Christophe. And in terms of the dynamic that you identify, Lord Fox, again, I think looking at the evidence, I can see that what's happened during the years of austerity is that the budgets committed by the police to external providers have fallen significantly, and the tendency has been to keep the in-house capacity and reduce the commissioning of services from outside. That's
are
what
you
happened. I'm not sure
with that?
I'm not sure that's what I said. I don't think we had a fixed view back in, when was it, 2010, 2000.
But now
11. Well, as part of the merits of the review is to take stock. Okay, well, those are the decisions taken in 2010. This is the evidence in front of us now. What do we feel the right path is going forward? I've already suggested to Lord Griffiths, I'm not, and I don't think the review steers us towards rewinding in any material way or going back to a single supplier model. It does push us quite firmly down a route of prioritising market stability and what I would call smarter commissioning going forward, and a second pillar around accreditation and quality, which I'm sure we'll come on to. Those, I would suggest, seem to be the two priorities that come out of the review.
Thank you. So what you're saying, Minister, is that the review that's being undertaken, I don't know, by the way, when is it likely to be published, will take into account whether there are pros and cons about a National Forensic Service, what will be the responsibility of Home Office and Ministry of Justice in terms of making sure that the market remains sustainable, etc. Is that correct?
In terms of the review, I'll fall back on ministerial speak, but publication is soon, by which, anticipating your pressure on that, I'd hope to have something out by the end of March. The reason why there are two reasons why we've delayed it a little. The first is I'm keen that when the review goes out, there's also an implementation plan against the recommendations, so that people can see that we're serious in relation to responding to recommendations, and it wasn't just a review just to have a review. So I'm keen that we have that dynamic to it, but also without wishing to stroke your lordships too much, we're very keen also to get a better sense of what you were being told through this inquiry, and very, very keen to digest your views as well. But the review, I mean, in relation to the review, what I can say is sort of four key themes have emerged. The first is around the need to ensure that police organisations and their contracted providers adhere to the quality standards set by the regulator, and I think we're all well aware that the pace of progress on that has been inadequate. A set of recommendations around a second theme around ensuring that the commercial model, coming back to Lord Fox's and Lord Griffith's questions going forward, is sustainable and encourages investment in quality. There's a third theme around making sure that the criminal justice system benefits from advances in science and technology by being able to develop and implement new forensic techniques more coherently. I think there's a clear sense we're not where we need to be in that space. And I would say that the fourth key theme that's come through is the need to provide practitioners and policymakers with stronger evidence and data to support decision making and facilitate more effective working with partners. There is an issue around the underlying evidence base and database and data sets underpinning this. I would say, in terms of steering your lordships, those seem to be the four key themes around which the recommendations in the review cluster and around which our implementation in response will cluster.
Well, thank you very much for that. I got a quick, short supplementary from Lord Valence and Baroness Young. Then I move on to Baroness Manningham-Buller.
Minister, this is a market where the predominant supplier is the same as the predominant procurer. In other words, it's public sector and it's the police force. And normally that kind of market would need to be regulated to make a success of the competitive part of it. You have a regulator for quality. Should you not review the need for a regulator of the market in terms of its pricing and its contracting?
It's a fair point, and it is something that we are reflecting on, and on which we would welcome this committee's view, and certainly welcome in discussions with the regulator herself about it. My mind, Lord Vance, at the moment is that the existing
Manningham-Buller, sorry to interrupt. Baroness Manningham-Buller is going to come on to the regulator side, but
no, I was just trying to answer Lord Vance's question, which is that at the moment I'd like to focus the existing regulator on quality and standards and accreditation and that agenda, and give her the statutory powers that she needs to enforce that. In terms of the regulation or management of this market, I'm very clear that has been inadequate attention has been paid to that in recent years, and therefore the future cannot be like the past. What the exact change is in terms of the arrangements around that, will emerge from the work of the review.
All I would say, Minister, is that in other markets these things tend to go hand in hand.
Yes, well, I defer to your knowledge of markets, Lord Vallis.
As young.
Lord Vance, still half my question, but I will persist a little bit further. The regulator said to us that smarter commissioning was really impossible at the moment because of the number of chief constables and police commissioners who were the commissioners. And so the question is, who is going to manage the market, which is the bit that Lord Vallon stole. But the other question is there a kind of vision thing within which any market regulation is going to be framed? What are the objectives? What's the long-term view about the way in which forensics will be developed in this country? Because we had a distressing piece of evidence from one of the global experts based in Australia who'd also been trained in Lausanne, which is apparently an ace place to be if you're a forensics person.
Is it? No.
And he gave us the rather chilling comment that the UK used to be the benchmark for forensics globally and now no longer is. So is there a vision thing that within which any market regulation will be nested?
I'll just make two points on this, Baroness Young. And I will answer your vision question, but to the gentleman in Lausanne or from Australia, I can't remember which. But we should, while quite rightly we are addressing some very real problems in the forensics marketplace that need addressing, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact and lose sight of some quite important positives, which is that we have some superb forensic science and scientists in this country, and I look at the data. We look at the data in terms of some of the outcomes, in terms of turnarounds and all the things that you might be looking for. In England and Wales, we rank very high with some extraordinarily fast turnarounds compared to other countries. So, while quite rightly we are beating ourselves up about some failures, we shouldn't lose sight that there are some very real strengths in the existing system. In terms of strategic vision, the police, which is my responsibility, we have a model for better or worse of operating autonomy. The police have a strategic vision 2025, into which this discussion plugs, and we are supporting that vision through the Transforming Forensics Programme with a significant amount of public investment, 30-odd million pounds. And underlying that, as I understand it, is a recognition that we need to build capability across the system, but also push the system to get its act together and be smarter in the way that it thinks and works together in terms of looking at capability gaps and formulating roadmaps to fill those capability gaps. And that is, I think, has been one of the problems in this market, is that there's been a very fragmented approach to this. And again, I've been candid in expressing my personal view that also that insufficient value has been attached to this, which is part of the reason why we're in the situation we're in. The response is to support a strategic approach that supports more collective leadership on this in terms of addressing some of the key capability gaps and identifying the roadmap to filling them, whether it be on fingerprints or digital forensics or that. So the detail of the Transforming Forensics Programme kind of sets out where we're putting public investment to support the Vision 2025 strategy.
Can I ask a really brief question, Minister, which is when you talked about the review that's being undertaken, which clearly sounds like a good idea, is that a Home Office review or is that a cross-departmental government review? Because obviously one of our concerns is about the joining up of strategic leadership and making sure the criminal justice system, that this is about the wider criminal justice system, not just the police. So whose review is it?
I kicked it off. I commissioned it. So it's Home Office led, but we always wanted it to be a joint review for reasons I hope that are obvious. So the NPCC and the APCC, the chiefs and the and the police and crime commissioners are very bound into it, and certainly at official level, the MOJ are inextricably linked into it as well. You know, this is about the criminal justice system.
Together.
So all the bits of it need to be plugged into a review of something that is so integral to the integrity of the criminal justice system.
Bernard Cunningham-Buller.
Minister, thank you for a preview of your review. We won't hold you to all those recommendations, but we will look for it with
I didn't tell you any recommendations. I
thought you said the four areas that we're going to focus on.
Themes.
Can I just pick you up on the point about standards? Early on in talking to us, you talked about driving standards, and this committee has found quite a lot of concerns about the fact that the standards may have gone in the other way. You've also just a minute ago talked about pushing the system. It's therefore a bit mysterious to us that the forensic science regulator has no statutory powers, and we were all a bit astonished to learn that a number of police forces have no accreditation for doing forensic works. Would you like to comment on those 2 points?
Yes. Well, I'll take them the other way round. You know, I expect full accreditation, or I expect to see credible roadmaps to full accreditation, and have made that clear in writing to chiefs. When was it, Christoph? October, November, something like that, in support of the regulator. The regulator needs to be put on a statutory basis, and I've committed to do that at the dispatch box. In practical terms, our mechanism for that is a private member's bill, and we have a private member, Chris Green, who is keen to take it forward. We've been extremely frustrated by the fact that it has been blocked not once but twice, I think now, which is nothing to do with the bill itself. It's to do with the shenanigans of private members' business in the Commons on a Friday, which is deeply frustrating. And we will persevere. Chris remains very keen on it. In fact, I think the next second reading for it is 2nd of March. 1st of March. So that's our next crack at that. I think there's cross-party support for it, so I wouldn't expect a problem for it as long as it gets its reading. If that route feels hopeless, then we'll resort to primary legislation and government business. But you'll know, Baroness, that at the moment that is very clogged up.
We have spotted this.
So that's an enormous frustration to me, because obviously that's the key change that needs to happen.
But you can see why the
lack of enforcement has been a problem here.
You can see why there's a concern from many people who've given us evidence that there is not far from improving standards, the opening of the market has done the opposite. And you clearly don't think that is the case, and that's interesting to hear. But we seem to be in a bit of a limbo before we can improve things. Would that be fair?
I'm not entirely on standards. What I see two things very clearly. I see a fragile market that needs to be stabilised, and some big decisions taken about how that market is managed or regulated going forward. And I see there needs to be a change in terms of how the process of accreditation and reassurance on quality and standards takes place going forward, because the past doesn't give you sufficient confidence that if the police are entirely left to their own devices, that it will happen. And therefore that's why I absolutely support the regulator being put on a statutory basis, and I am frustrated that our sort of plan A has been frustrated on a couple of instances, and not without hope that the next outing will be successful. But it's one of my priorities in this space. It's one of the key changes that we have to see.
Yeah, I think we're drifting into what question maybe Barrister Neville Jones wants to ask.
Thank you, Chairman. Minister, the witness who remarked that the UK had been a benchmark, and he was, I'm afraid, using the past tense, was also, when asked what would you like to see happen, said, oh, well, really transformational change.
Oh, right.
Now, a question I really want to ask you is you've very kindly given us the main themes of the review, which does, I have to say, I think, tackle some of the real issues. Do you actually agree with this judgment that transformational change is needed? And how far do you think your review, which does tackle some big subjects, will actually result in material change?
Material I'm comfortable with. I have a prejudice against the word transformation and transformational because it is so overused in this place, not least by ministers. So you'll just forgive me, I have a prejudice against that word. But does there need to be material change? Yes, for reasons that I've said.
And what would what would you like to see emerge as a result of? Where do you see the need for?
I think the two changes I want to see. There's a short-term priority, which is market stability. Mm-hmm. We were having to actively manage day-to-day fragility that carried significant risk to the integrity of this, and we should not have been in that situation. So for me, the priority is market stability and then sustainability.
That means no providers not going out of business.
Yes, it does. Which means there needs to be a change in capability, a change in attitudes, and a change in culture in terms of those commissioning and buying. Mm-hmm. And underlying that needs to be, in my view, a higher level of understanding of the value of a sustainable, high quality forensics market, and that hasn't been, I think, the case sufficiently up to now. And through the transform, although I have a prejudice against this word, it is called the Transforming Forensics Program. If I'd had my way, it would have been called something else. But it is meant to make a material change to the capability of the police system in managing this market. The second part of what I want to see, apart from market stability and sustainability, is a change of gears in relation to accreditation, the need for accreditation, compliance with accreditation. So this is a system thinking very consistently about quality.
Right. And when you say that, do you mean raising the bar for accreditation, or what? I
mean compliance with the codes that have already been laid down, and statutory powers for the regulator to investigate and enforce.
Right, I see.
That's a material change.
You said one other thing which was very interesting in the course of outlining the various thoughts that you've got on this, and you mentioned the need for collective leadership. Could you expand on that?
Yeah,
because I see to be a constructive thought. So
you've got me onto one of my bugbears, which is one of there's a bigger. We're talking about something very important here, but there's a bigger picture here. We have a very fragmented police system. We have 43 police chiefs. We have 43 police and crime commissioners. We have a Home Office, we have an inspectorate, we have a college, we have a complaints. This is a system that historically has not worked together as effectively as anyone would want. There is now a recognition about the need for more collective leadership. In fact, I had a meeting in the Home Office with the whole system talking about exactly that this morning. There are strengths in the model in terms of local accountability, and those are real and need to be built on, but there are weaknesses in terms of how this system works together, both in terms of, from your past, in terms of managing real risk now, which whether it be serious organised crime or counterterrorism, that has no respect of borders, but on issues like this, where the system has to respond to evidence of failure, historically, whether it be disclosure or forensics, the system historically has been too slow, has been insufficiently agile to respond, and that at the heart of that is the challenges of this fragmented system and how you drive change across this model. And that is one of the big challenges for police leadership, one of the big challenges for any policing minister, and one of my top priorities now. So this is a subset of a bigger issue around collective police leadership in our police system.
Do you think an effective professional body for forensic science would itself be a contribution to that? I mean, you're talking partly about how the existing system works more efficiently and with greater strategic leadership, and I think the committee would agree with you about that. But there's also the question of how the forensic science profession itself organises it.
Well, I welcome comments from colleagues there. But part of what I think the value of the TFP, the Transforming Forensic Programme, is around trying to build that national network of capability and that collective support behind practitioners in a way that didn't exist before. And I can see that happening in other areas of sort of police activity where the penny has dropped, that kind of capabilities need to be built on a national basis, and the system has to work together in a more effective basis. There needs, coming back to Baroness Young's point, there needs to be clearer statements of what we're all working towards, and much clearer kind of roadmaps and plans to get there. You know, that is, whether it be forensics or the challenges around disclosure or a whole host of other challenges, that is what I'm beginning to see across the police system now. And to be fair to the police, there has been a response in relation to accreditation. There is movement here. It's just not as fast as anyone would have liked. And to me, that signals that also it's a statement of their prioritisation to some degree. And if I can close on this, I think what the committee, I'm sure, will recognise, and I have to be sensitive to, is that if you're a police chief now, you know, you're running a system that is under a great deal of pressure, that has a whole set of competing priorities, and you know, one shouldn't underestimate the leadership challenge that they have got.
Okay. Chairman, can I just have one follow-up, which is logical? I mean, this is a big subject that you're talking about. Does the scope of your review cover all of that, or what you've just talked about go beyond the review itself?
I would say that the Transforming Forensics Programme is our response to some of that system failure, that lack of collective working that I tried clumsily to articulate. And so the review will talk to the institutional response to that within that specific context. The broader conversation about how we get this police system to work better is a bigger issue that we're taking into the CSR and our other deliberations around the future of policing in this country.
Something you must have said, Minister, that produced a lot of excitement. So I've got quick questions from Lord Hunt, Lord Thomas and Lord Fox.
Minister, you commented about the large number of different types of organisation across the country, and these lead to obviously to difficulties. But one of the things I was going to ask was, you have a chief scientist with you. To what extent is science and the analysis of science, as it were, giving us some readout about the different performance? Because we've heard here such different organisations across the country, and I just wondered what you've learned from the sort of scientific organisational study of that.
John, can I hand this to you?
Sure. So, I mean, I think from a scientific point of view, and particularly in relation to the market itself, the provision of scientific research has been one thing that I think is integral to quality, and we have, it is not in the place that we would like it to be. However, I think that there is, an acknowledgement of that, and the review is looking at how we will take that forward to understand the scientific needs across the system, which goes to how you actually design the system so it meets the quality standards, which I think are integral with the scientific rationale. So I think we do really need to understand how that basis forms of scientific understanding in order to then understand how the market looks at the provision as well. So some places will have very limited research and development, and that will then lead them to be questionable about the amount of quality, whereas other places have considerable
So is the
research.
methodology you're using new? If you have to develop a new methodology to actually analyse all these different, quite different organisations and how they relate?
So I don't know if we've done any particular methodology on the organisational structure, although that is something we could certainly look at.
Lord Thomas.
Forensic science goes beyond policing. It involves the judiciary, it involves the defence community. When setting a strategy, how do you involve people other than police and crime commissioners and chief constables? Because you will never make a system that has proper strategic leadership, in my view, unless you bring everyone together under someone who gives this some structure. That's been the failing of the last few years. How do you intend to remedy it?
Well, I accept large parts of your premise, Lord Thomas. Perhaps we can come back, Christoph, you can talk to this around the process around the review. Because as I think I made clear in a previous answer, although it was a review kicked off by the Home Office and involves the whole of the police system, this is about the whole of the criminal justice system. So perhaps, Christoph, say something about...
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the process, and going back to the earlier question as to who we involved, we deliberately set out to interview the judiciary, members of the judiciary, defence and others in order to gather views. And the stakeholders involved in that echoed your point, Lord Thomas, that actually there had to be a stronger sense of the understanding of the risks across the system and improvements in the sharing of those risks within the criminal justice system, even if the police are the primary procurers.
Now that you know the Minister have answered my question, how are you going to involve the judiciary, the defence community, the whole of the criminal justice system in strategic leadership? Because if that doesn't happen, you won't solve the problems. You have to look at this as underpinning justice and not simply about markets. I'm sorry to be so critical, but this is, to my mind, the central failing of the last few years.
I understand, and clearly you feel strongly about that, but
yes.
With respect, we have tried to answer your question, because in the process of the review that is looking at what needs to change in the future, we've done exactly what you're encouraged us to do in terms of talk to all parts of the criminal justice system that connect with this issue. It is not an issue that is in a police silo in any sense, in terms of the recommendations that go forward in relation to change. Again, I would not expect them to be limited to the way that the police work. And I've also been clear, I think, in my statements that I recognise that part of the problem up till now has been insufficient leadership in relation to how this market and system works.
Would you have a suggestion, Lord Thomas, to make that the review might take on board?
Yes, that you should get together the judiciary, the defence community, and put them into the leadership model, and not look at this through the 83 police and crime commissioners and chief constables. Let's see it as a broader vision than the narrow vision of concentrating on markets and police. That's my point.
And I think I've said we accept that point, and that's
Good.
exactly the approach we're taking through the review, where the review will take us in terms of recommendations going forward. We'll see at the end of March, but I think actually we're more aligned than you think in terms of the approach. In terms of the approach that we're taking. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister. Lord Fox.
A while ago, when you were talking about the statutory nature of the regulator, you said that the police, left to their own devices, may not bring in things like transformation. Separated by about 10 minutes, you then said that you had sympathy for the police who have competing priorities. As an observation, I would say that might be an argument for not giving the police the job of delivering 80% of the forensic service. But it perhaps is also an explanation why the Transforming Forensics programme is struggling to get traction. And you haven't mandated that the police forces get involved in this. We've already acknowledged that it'll be a long time before there's statutory powers for that regulator. So between now and then, it's up to you cajoling, spending a lot of money trying to persuade them to do this, or finding a way of taking on some of those statutory powers yourself, or elsewhere, and making them do it. So what's the thinking here?
So I think I've just made two points. The challenge of prioritisation is a real one, and I just think anyone looking at this needs to be sensitive to the fact that our police leadership system is under a great deal of pressure at the moment. We ask a hell of a lot of them at this moment in time. I just think in the real world, and most people around this table have run organisations and led organisations, we have to be sensitive to the kind of pressure that we're putting on human leadership in that system at this moment in time. In relation to their response to the transforming forensic programme and our willingness/ability to mandate, our model is one of police operating autonomy at the moment. And when I say at the moment, don't overinterpret that. I don't see any initiative to fundamentally change that. So at the moment, our approach is to put the investment into building the capability and helping design better operating systems and being able to demonstrate those so that people want to come in, want to buy effectively. And in my experience, I don't know what other people's experience is, that is, over the long term, often a better route to getting sustainable buy-in to change rather than it being mandated remotely.
But I mean, not everything is...
From the centre. And in terms of engagement with transforming forensic programme, Christoph, do you want to update the committee in terms of how the police are engaging with it at the moment?
Yeah, so I mean, you've heard from the Chief Constable James Vaughan and Joe Ashworth. There are difficulties in persuading people. Mm-hmm. However, over the course of the last period, there have been significant improvements as they've built up those capabilities in demonstrating. And the primary one that's being built at the moment is around the commercial. And we can see that increasingly there's acceptance by police forces that they will use that capability to facilitate the management of contracts. They will now move on to, and they are moving on to quality, which is again providing a service, and they will move shortly on to science. So as they build those capabilities, police forces see something real and tangible, they will be coming on board and participating in those. And there's an improvement in that at the moment as confidence grows amongst PCCs and chiefs as well.
But sorry, just come back. But not everything is autonomous, is it? So there are things that each police force is expected to do, and some things which are let to autonomy. So why is this particular issue drawn into the autonomous side rather than the required activity of police forces? What was it that?
My ability to mandate is very limited, and nor am I entirely persuaded, Lord Fox, that this context to mandate in this situation, even if I could, is necessarily the right thing to do. I would, again, I just come back to sort of experience of most effective change management is to bring people with you and to get people to see the benefits of what's being proposed and what's being offered, and that's the approach we're taking, alongside, as I said, a clear signal from me and the Home Office that this matters to us, and anyone who knows about the police system is they do pay attention to what the Home Office prioritises, and as this goes on, as we get clearer evidence about the degree to which the police system is engaged with this or not, then we will revisit the degree to which we send our signals to them about the prioritisation we expect them to attach to it. That feels to me the most sensible path, given the model that we've got in relation to the relationship between the government and the police.
Baroness Morgan, you wanted to comment?
I mean, I understand what you're saying about the limited ability to mandate and your arguments against it, but in a time of really tight budgets, my impression when we had the evidence on the transforming work was that quite a lot of time and money was being spent doing this endless persuasion work. And, with the best will in the world, the Chief Constable of Dorset was not pulling some of the big police forces in. And I just wonder when you will take a decision, that when you'll look at it and think, well, this is just not going fast enough or effectively enough. I mean, maybe there has been a rapid change, but it wasn't hugely convincing.
No, and it's still, proving itself as a
and it felt expensive.
It's proving itself as a programme, significant public investment behind it, which I'm sensitive to. So I meant what I said. I will look at the evidence of police buy-in to it. If it's underwhelming, then we may have to change tack.
Lord Mayor.
Minister, I think my question is probably best answered by Professor Aston. What is the role of the Government Office of Science in providing sort of ongoing communication of advice? Can you say a bit about that?
Sure. So, Government Office for Science is very important, in particularly the relationship between the GCSA and the CSA network across government. I have very close links with the Government Office for Science and meet very regularly with the Government Chief Scientific Advisor. I think it allows the Go Science and the CSA network really allow a understanding of scientific issues across government, which is very beneficial because it allows you to join up various different parts of government. I think Go Science has sort of three main responsibilities. They should sort of provide information to government about new technology that's available. It should really sort of help make sure that there is good evidence for policy underlying government policy. And then finally, it should be looking at sort of national security and resilience. I think for forensics, all three of those are important in that it cuts across all three. And as you'll know, the previous Government Chief Scientific Advisor, Sir Mark Walpott, dedicated one of his annual reports to forensics to show that it really was of a high priority for Go Science and for the government scientific community.
And so, who do you currently receive advice from on forensic science? Where is the
within the government or across?
Well, both.
So we have a close relationship with the regulator, because I think she has a lot of expertise to bring in terms of that. There's also advice from the academic community. There are some really strong academic groups, not enough probably within this country, but there's groups in Dundee, at UCL. There's many academic groups where we can get advice from. And then we also use the CSA network across government to gain their expertise about particular and specific areas and get their input as well.
And so is the advice that you're talking about mainly about the provision of forensic science, or is it about the latest findings, the latest developments, latest innovations?
From my point of view, I think the most important thing that I can contribute as a non-forensic scientist to this is to make sure that I get accurate and a good understanding of what the latest techniques are, so that they can be brought into the discussion. But then also to understand what the barriers and restrictions are to the research being done across the board. So I think it's really important to see that forensic science research and development is something that has a very wide landscape. So it goes everywhere from pure academic research happening in universities through to research that is much more on the development side that should be happening by providers, police, etc. And there is a role for us to understand how that funding landscape is in place to enable us to make sure we're getting the best forensic advice both into the police but also at an academic level.
And do you identify areas that need further science research and development?
So I think that in the same way that the system itself is fragile, I think that there is really good forensic science being done in a number of places, but it is fragile across the piece, and I think we need to actually enhance all those areas. So there are some really good people doing forensic science in an academic, but there probably aren't enough of them. And then similarly, if you look at some of the research and development that's going on in commercial providers, there's a little bit, some of which is excellent. However, there's not enough of it across the board. It's one of the issues with the quality provision, in the sense that research and development, from my point of view, is entirely linked to quality. And if you're not getting good research and development, you aren't getting quality forensics, because it's about getting that next set of things in place as well.
Can I ask a related question, which is that when you're looking for new potential forensic techniques to which the Minister referred at the beginning, how do you, new science techniques, shall I say, rather than forensic, how do you look for those, and how do you find those, and which have a forensic application, and how do you communicate those to the people who need to be aware of them?
So I think you've actually touched on something that's really important, in the sense that I think we are in a position that sometimes techniques that are seen to be forensic science are actually quite limiting, if you look at it that way. I think there are many techniques across science, and I think we should be clear about social science as well. I think it's not just about hard sciences, it's about understanding how behavioural science is involved, about how ethics and other things come into this equation, particularly when we get to things like digital forensics. And I think what we really need to understand is how we put, how we get people to understand that the work they are doing is of value to forensic science. Now, changes in the REF, structure, the Research Excellence Framework, will hopefully help with that, but I think there has been bars in the past for people to understand that there's something that's worthwhile to do for forensics, because the rewards associated with doing that have been limited. But I think with changes to UKRI and with changes to the REF, I think that will help identify things that come up as being important to forensic science.
Lord Keeker.
Thank you, Lord Chairman. I just want to continue the discussion about the science base. Firstly, Minister, you contend that the science base that underpins routine practice of forensics is sufficiently robust, and that the criminal justice system can have confidence in it. And secondly, what approach do you think the Home Office should be taking now, beyond what we've heard, in terms of encouraging UKRI to pursue this as an issue of national priority, bearing in mind that we've heard that the previous single supplier system was associated with potentially a more focused, but of course that may not have been the case, but a more focused approach towards developing a robust science base in which the criminal justice system could have confidence.
I think what I'd say, John, I want to know John's view on this. I'm influenced by the response of the review that I commissioned, and as I suggested before, one of the four key themes that has kind of emerged from that review is a clear steer that the criminal justice system needs to do more. We need to change things in relation to making sure that we benefit from advances in science and technology and the development of new forensic techniques, and the review seems to be suggesting quite clearly we're not where we need to be, and some recommendations and some actions will flow from that. But John, do you want to expand on that?
I mean, particularly on UKRI, for example, I think that the formation of UKRI really gives us a real opportunity. I think previously the research councils themselves were rather siloed, and I think that forensics is not something that fits neatly into a silo. I don't think it neatly fits into any one of the boxes of chemistry, physics. I think it's an applied science that cuts across many things, and it cuts across both science and social science, as we've said. I think UKRI, the premise of setting up UKRI was to try and break down these silos. The fact that all of the research councils now sit under one body is really, the idea was to try and break that set of silos. And so I think we should be challenging UKRI to show that, in the case of forensics as an example, they can really deliver on the promise that they're. Having said that, we're now in discussions with UKRI. So I've met Mark Walpott as the CEO. I'm having regular discussions with the chairs of EPSRC and ESRC to make sure that we can take the forensics agenda forward, because I think everybody realises that it's an area that needs help. It is a government priority, but there is some really fundamental research that can be done, and exciting research that can be done, that can be supported by UKRI.
So would we be right in interpreting that answer as saying that areas have been identified and that you are down the line of having established pathways by which UKRI will be either commissioning research or inviting calls around those themes in a reasonably short time frame.
That's certainly what I would hope. I think UKRI has a mandate to look at not only basic research but also government priorities, and I think this is an area where there seems to be willingness on all sides to take those priorities forward.
And where would you have an anxiety about that actually being delivered? Are there roadblocks that need either by the Home Office or others to be identified to push that strategy forward?
So I think rather than saying that I'm worried about that particular strategy in itself, what I think would be something that we would be of a concern was to make sure that we have an end-to-end delivery. So it's all very well us doing excellent basic science of a forensic nature. What's as important is to then make sure that that is being used into the criminal justice system. So I think there is a role for UKRI to get the basic research done, but then there is a role for research within the Home Office, research within policing, research within commercial providers, in order for them to actually then take through the basic research and to really use that whole landscape. And I think making sure that is joined up is going to be something that is both a challenge, but also something I think we can do.
And who at the moment has the overview of all of those different domains and who's tying them together?
So I think it will be government science that ultimately we have to make sure delivers on that.
So that would be the chief scientific advisor then in the Home Office having.
I think I would certainly say that I have a big role to play in that, but I also think that it's more than just the Home Office, as we've heard.
Okay. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, you had a supplement.
Just on the question of UKRI and its engagement on the kind of science you've just been discussing, would the Home Office and the MOJ actually have funding to be able to say to UKRI, we believe this is sufficiently important, we want you to do this? Because UKRI has fixed budgets and has to satisfy an awful lot of different sectors. Are you saying that the Home Office and the MOJ would actually be saying, we, that is you, have the funding to encourage UKRI to do more on forensic science?
So we already fund research in forensic science. We have a programme of the order of about £1 million of research, mainly funded through DSTL, looking at research in forensic science. So I think we should be in a position that we are encouraging DSTL, and Defence Science Technology Laboratory, it's the government, DSTL, looking at and trying to understand how we use that funding to encourage UKRI to sort of look at those things as well. But I think it is something that we're going to have to look at.
So you're actually, ideally, you would like to commit more funding?
Yes, absolutely.
Possible. Thank you.
And the committee will be aware that we're speaking in the context of an imminent comprehensive spending review. We don't know when it will start. We don't know when it will end. But it is we're planning it for it next year, and that's where the resources get mapped for whatever period the CSR extends. So that's the next big opportunity for us to do what needs to get done in that space, and the Home Office and MOJ will be discussing that jointly, and joined up government is visible now because the next minister is now among us. So here we are, and we will be very alive to any recommendations from the committee in terms of kind of how this very important area gets properly resourced going forward.
Yeah, well, one more question from Baroness Young before we move on to your colleague. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Minister.
Chairman, I want to cheat and ask two. I mean, just to follow up from what you've just said. Just going back to the issue of standards and regulation. The impression we got from talking to the regulator and others was that it was difficult to unravel how much of the lack of performance to standards was as a result of inadequate powers on the part of the regulator or inadequate resource. And indeed, there was the view taken by some that if the regulator did insist that all providers adhered to the standards, that the service would fall apart because there simply isn't sufficient resource in to get all of the providers up to that standard. I wonder if you've got a view about how much of the problem is inadequate powers to the regulator and how much of it is that we're trying to get it on a shoestring.
I think there's a 2.5. I think actually. So I think resource has been an issue because that has driven procurement behaviour, or has in part driven procurement behaviour. That situation has eased
a bit in the sense that as a country we now are investing significantly more into our police system, police settlement that's before Parliament now could see up to additional £970 million worth of public money in our police system on top of £460 million additional money this year. That has helped with some of the sorts of budgetary constraints that undeniably are part of the music here. I've already been very clear that I do consider giving the regulator statutory powers is one of the most important things that we can do. So that's an acknowledgement that I think will make a material difference in relation to enforcement and focusing people's minds. Of course, there's another element in terms of some of the underlying complexity, and we haven't really talked about digital evidence or digital forensic, but undeniably part of the challenge for the police, catching up in terms of accreditation standards is that the market is moving extremely fast, and I would say that the whole area of digital evidence, digital forensics, is one of the most challenging within this space, but not least because of the velocity of change.
The evidence we've seen on digital said that the volume of data now available was probably inversely in proportion to the amount of money going into the services that were analysing it compared with the rest of the forensic spectrum. And we did see poor souls at the police lab across the river staring intently at screens doing manual analysis of mobile phone information. What's happening about getting better technology to help with management of these large volumes of data?
It is a priority, and in part, frankly, triggered by the collective action we're taking to bear down on the disclosure problem, because obviously digital is part of that problem. So there's I think a very good action plan in that space, and at the heart of that is trying to support the police to get further up the curve in terms of their capabilities around digital intelligence investigation, and we're investing actively in that through something called the Digital Policing Portfolio, which is again part of the Police Transformation Fund, and that is about again collective leadership around a target operating model and mapping kind of where we are against that and identifying what needs to be done to get to where we need to get to. So there's a sort of assessment of current capabilities and a view of what needs to be done to get to a sort of better optimal operating model. So we're actively funding that, and within the Transforming Forensic Programme, which is linked, is a work around a capability roadmap and working towards a smarter national procurement plan for digital forensics. Do you want to expand on that, Christoph? So these two programmes interact, but there's a clear recognition that the police system needs to climb a curve faster than it has done in terms of not just the technology, but also the human capability as well that goes alongside it in terms of managing and taking decisions and making choices around digital evidence and the procurement of digital forensics. Yeah. Do you want to expand on that, Christian?
Yeah, so the Transforming Forensics is moving on to looking at how it can best connect in with the digital investigations and intelligence. It's one of the kind of priorities that policing are asking for. It's one of those areas, I think, coming back to the accreditation question, it is really difficult, although the Forensic Science Regulator is doing a lot of work in this area to ensure that there are basic standards and accreditation standards that need to be met in the digital forensic space as much as anywhere else, indeed, has issued some of those standards. Where it becomes particularly interesting is the new types of tools using machine learning. What does that mean for a police officer? How can you have enough confidence? And then picking up on the question as to how that goes all the way through to the court system, how do you explain that in those cases where it does to a court so that they can have confidence that judgments that are made through that process can be ones that the court can rely on? And I don't know if John would like to mention a bit more about
So from a research point of view, the Home Office is funding research on providing tools for downloading mobile devices. I think you've heard about the kiosk system, and looking at how you can expand upon that using tools from AI. And then the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice are jointly working with the Turing Institute, who've just received £48 million of strategic priority funding, Wave 1 money from UKRI, and a large part of that is going to be looking at the effect of data on and data analytics on the criminal justice system. So I think that will be something where we can actually really...
Thank you. Investment going into this area. Yeah.
Thank you very much, for Minister and Professor Astor and Mr. Prince. Minister, thank you very much for coming today. We're very appreciative of your time. I think it's right that we release you now to the Brexit debate.
Oh, really? Okay.
but on the other hand, if you don't wish to, please stay on.
Thank you. And
thank you very much.
We genuinely look forward to your report and recommendations with great interest.
Thank you very much. I hope you'll find the report helpful.
The proceeding is currently suspended. 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 The proceeding is currently suspended.
Minister, and thank you very much for coming to help us with this inquiry.
Thank you.
It's very important that we hear from Ministry of Justice about the use of forensic science and its provision for criminal justice system. But we're very appreciative. I know you've got a busy day across there, and despite that, thank you for making the time. For the record, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and your colleagues can do so after you've done it, so we get it on record, then we'll proceed with the questions.
Thank you. My name is Lucy Fraser. I'm a Minister in the Ministry of Justice, and I'm also the MP for South East Cambridgeshire.
And I'm Fiona Rutherford, Deputy Director for Legal Aid Policy at the Ministry of Justice.
And I'm Matthew Gould, Deputy Director for Criminal Court and Criminal Law Policy at the MOJ.
Thank you very much. Minister, do you want to say anything in this opening statement, or declare your interest or anything?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I mentioned to the clerk that when I was a barrister and before I became an MP, I acted for the government in relation to the science, the Forensic Science Service at the time of its closure.
Okay. Shall we move on to the questions? Are you happy with that?
Yes, yes,
okay.
yes.
Well, if I might kick off, in the evidence we heard a lot about, in regards to legal aid, and how the legal aid provision just now is insufficient, particularly for the defense, to be able to use forensic science to challenge the prosecution forensic science. So, and I understand you're undertaking a review of the legal aid provision. So would you like to comment, one, on whether you think there is evidence that legal aid provision currently plays against the defense being able to use it? And secondly, about the review that you're undertaking.
Yes, of course. So I think it's really important. I was a barrister, as I mentioned. I think it's really important that for justice to be delivered, that you have to have proper representation.
Sorry, Minister.
That's okay. Should I wait a few moments?
I think I'm okay, thank you very much. So I'm leaving now.
Sorry, Minister, please continue.
That's okay. I think it's very important that you have equal and proper representation on both sides. And obviously it's important that plays out in forensic evidence, as in all evidence. The Legal Aid Agency regularly reviews a number of things, and it's disappointing if people are saying that they don't have access to this information, to this expertise. The rules in relation to the legal aid are, and I think you've got evidence from the Legal Aid Agency, they've put in written evidence, that the maximum rate for forensic experts is £90 an hour and £72 an hour for outside London. They will increase those rates where it is necessary. And also, legal aid should be available as a disbursement, as with any disbursement, if there is a sufficient benefit to the client, to the case, in the instruction of a forensic expert report, and the cost of the expert is reasonable. So there should be legal aid available for the forensic expert. You mentioned we're doing a legal aid review. Expert fees were changed, and we are looking at a number of matters. We haven't released that report yet, so I think I shouldn't disclose what will be in the report when it comes out.
Okay, any idea when that might be?
It should come out soon.
Okay.
We said early in the new year, and it will be coming out early in the new year.
Okay. Lord Thomas, do you have any?
No, not on this. I think the evidence is obviously contradictory, because it may be the Legal Aid Agency is not applying what you've mandated.
Well, we will look carefully at your report and the evidence that you put forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Bernice Morgan.
Minister, can I ask you about scientific understanding? We've had quite a lot of evidence, I think, from a whole range of people actually, about the patchy level of scientific understanding, particularly around probability, actually. And I think we're interested in to what extent we ought to be having more mandatory training in scientific principles, and I think particularly around probability, for legal professionals. And is there a way that you could be updating knowledge as we go forward? I mean, we had really interesting evidence on the judicial primers, but it seemed a bit ad hoc. It seemed a group of people doing that, and that was great, but not very clear what would happen when they finished their work, not very clear how many areas that they'd really cover. It almost felt like a group of people has rather willingly got together to do it, rather than it was being properly supported and funded and run, really. And yet it seemed a good model. So I'm just wondering what your thinking is in this broad area.
So I think there's a number of important points on training. The first one is that obviously training of all kinds and expertise is good. And we should encourage it wherever possible. As those who've sat in various courts will tell you, judicial training is the responsibility of the judiciary by the Judicial College. And I understand, and I've seen some of the evidence that came before this committee, that is happening. And you mentioned the primers, which were the first two, and I think by the suggestion of first two, I presume there are others to follow, is helping the judiciary undertake their role. And I saw from the evidence, particularly of Lord Hughes, saying that there is judicial training and they do liaise with the Royal Society. There is also, I was a barrister, and I saw your evidence from the legal profession, where the bar have put out evidence specifically on this matter. All barristers are required, as are solicitors, to do CPD, and this is an area where you can get training in forensics. Interestingly, actually, shortly after I became a barrister, you have to do, and it's mandatory to do, a module in forensic accounting. So that is mandated. This is not mandated, but that's the responsibility of the professions and not the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice. But I would support it and encourage it wherever it was possible. The second point worth noting is what is the responsibility of the expert, and what is the responsibility of the judge, and what is the responsibility of professional legal advisors and representatives. And they have different responsibilities. And I think one of your judges said, I think Lord Hughes said it, and Sir Brown referred to it, it's not the role of the judge to put forward the expert evidence. It's the role of the expert to put forward the evidence. And the civil procedure rules, which Sir Brian Levison referred to in his evidence, sets out the parameters and the requirements of the expert. So the expert has a duty to the court. There's a timetable of who puts in what evidence, and the possibility of experts narrowing down the issues. So I think it's the role of the expert to identify the key issues in relation to their expert evidence, and it is the role of judges and barristers to ensure that that is clearly communicated, and inconsistencies are highlighted, rather than them being experts in the evidence themselves. And if I could just draw an analogy by way of a third point, to other areas of law that come before the courts. So you will find counsel and solicitors appearing in cases which range cover a number of sectors, of which they have very limited knowledge. So I'm sure the judges around the table will have heard cases in which, before that case came before them, or when they were acting as a barrister, they had absolutely no knowledge of that case at all. I did cases on foreign law, on pharmaceuticals, a whole range of sectors that I had zero knowledge of. And it wasn't my role to become an expert. It was my role to help the expert explain the issues to the court and identify discrepancies in the evidence on the other side. So I think that's a long way of saying, yes, I'm in favour of training and expertise, but I don't think that judges and representatives need to become the experts.
I agree with that, but where there has been work done, for example, on the primers, and I can't remember. I think it was it Gate? There was one. There was where it was, the evidence was overwhelming that this was not actually reliable.
Yeah.
So why hasn't? I take the point that that's gone to the judges, but why is that not just widely disseminated around the legal profession as a whole? I mean, what's the point of that work happening if it's only got a sort of rather narrow?
So we are working with the Home Office to see whether we should be putting things like that towards to jurors, for instance, who would fall within our
because it just seems it was actually an example of people cooperating. I mean, we keep searching for ways to get the different parts of the criminal justice system to work together on this area. The primers seem to me to be an example of that, and yet it seems very modest in its ambitions, and yet it seemed a good model.
Yes, I think it is a good model, and I think it's been well received.
Okay, Lord Fox first, and Lord Hunt.
Taking your point about experts setting evidence up, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, but of course we have a situation where the experts themselves are not subject to any peer review, and we have large quantities of experts who are actually operating without any accreditation. So that sets certain alarm bells running. We've heard evidence around that serial misunderstanding of proportional and statistical evidence. So would it not seem sensible to have some sort of minimum amount of coaching to juries about the significance of statistical information, whether it's from the expert themselves or indeed from the court, so that at least they can put in some context the evidence that they're having, if the experts themselves may either choose not to or not be asked to by the lawyers in any other way. So in a sense, in the ideal world, what you say is true, but we're not operating in that ideal world.
In relation to the regulator and the accreditation,
the non-statutory regulator,
the non-statutory regulator and accreditation. We will look forward to the Home Office review. We are supportive of the Home Office's approach, we're supportive of the Private Members Bill that the Home Office is supporting, that would put that on a statutory footing. In relation to jurors, as I mentioned, we are looking to taking forward some work with the Home Office to work with the judiciary to see whether something similar to the primers could be put to the jurors.
Lord Hunt.
Yes, I had some experience myself as an outside scientific expert in a trial at the Old Bailey, and the thing was that there was very considerable difference between the scientists, who were both experts, but at that time, as this was 15 years ago or something, there wasn't very much guidance given to the jury about these differing scientific interpretations, one of which was very different to the other, and it led to the decision. And this is what, as I understand it, there has been a positive trend over the last 10 years in which the judge does actually try to get the scientists together. So that and my point, which I tried to raise in the question here, which was that when experiments are done, which are very expensive, it's a sensible idea that the experiments are discussed by the different parties before you then consider how they were applied. And so I just wonder whether this kind of progress is now continuing.
So the procedure in the court is very much in the hands of the judge, governed by the civil procedure rules. And the civil procedure rules set out the ability to narrow the points at issue between the experts so that the issues that go to the jury are discrete issues, so that as much as possible is agreed. In my experience, a limited experience, which is not in the criminal field, that does happen where you narrow the issues as much as possible.
Yes,
now,
fine.
that can be done by both parties putting in a report and then doing an agreed statement of facts and then just having the issues in contention, or it can be done by sequential reports. There is an ability in the criminal procedure rules for the instruction of one joint expert, although I can see the advantage in having two. So a good system, the structure is set out for the system to be able to enable the experts to work together. And we should remember, experts, as in most people who appear before the court in terms of professionals, it's the duty of a barrister. Their primary duty is not to the client, it is to the court, and so too with experts. It is the duty of the expert to come to the truth and not to fight for their client. They may have differing opinions on the science, but they should collaborate as far as possible and then leave the matters in dispute to the jury.
But in the UK, it seems like people will use expertise where it comes. Whereas in America, there's a very, very rigid system of using peer-reviewed material, and they wouldn't allow you to use material that was, as it were, developed ad hoc, as it were, for the particular case. I mean, is the peer review question being used in the UK in a different way, or is it, if I may say, used in a pragmatic way?
Well, all experts should set out the basis. In their report, they should set out the basis on which they have come to their opinions, the literature that they have referred to. That literature should be available. I mean, if there are improvements that we can make, and the committee makes some good recommendations, the criminal procedure rules, which is led by Sir Brian, the Criminal Rules Committee, Procedure Rules Committee, could look at whether we can improve the rules. But the rules do set out quite a good structure in terms of expertise, duty to the court, ability to... And I saw, and I thought it was quite interesting that Lord Hughes mentioned, where he said something like, it's the... you didn't say cross-exam, but, you see the expert limping out of the court. A good team within the court should be able to cross-examine the expert to find the truth.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, Barrister Young.
That leads on to the use of streamlined forensic reporting, which sounded like a good thing in terms of being able to get one view of the science in a comparatively simplified way. But we've had some evidence that it's actually now being seen as a way of saving money, and may in fact just simply paper over some difficult questions, which then the court is left to flounder around in subsequently. Have you got any thoughts on where the streamlined forensic reporting systems going and whether it's a good thing or not.
So the streamlining reports are good for the purpose for which they ought to be used. So they should be a preliminary stage. They're prepared for the CPS, for case management. They're not and shouldn't be a final expert report used in the case. And I know that the forensic science regulator raised some concerns about the inappropriate use of the streamlined forensic reporting in her 2017 report. And the Rule Committee spoke with her at the time, and I know that they're in touch with her quite regularly. We are not aware of any particular problems at the moment, but if issues are raised in relation to the use of these, we are obviously very happy to ask the Criminal Procedure Rules Committee to look at it again to see whether we can strengthen the use of these reports, which should be used, as I said, by the CPS at an early stage.
And is there any risk that even in the way the CPS uses them, that they just simply don't get enough information to understand that there are nuances beneath the surface?
They shouldn't be simplistic. I mean, I think the context for this, of course, is the efforts the court has made over a decade or more to get better at the pre-trial stage of the hearing so that the main trial is effective. And many of these things built on Sir Brian Levison's review of efficiency that we're still implementing. So I think the direction of travel to enable the judge to better control and grip the preparation that leads to the hearing is a really good thing. The forensic summary should not be so light that it does away with important matters of nuance. It should be a sensible primer, just as early notice of a Section 41 application is a helpful bit of information at an early stage that enables the judge to think about how they'll manage the trial. So is this a witness who'll take 20 minutes because it's agreed? Is it a witness who'll take a morning because it needs to be challenged? That's the intention, and I think, as the Minister says, it's an intention that in the MOJ we strongly support. If it isn't working in practice, that's something we would want to look at, and the Rule Committee are in touch with the regulator.
Okay. Lord Griffiths.
No, Sorry, I didn't realise I was being called on this one as well.
That's all right.
We've taken evidence from a variety of people who commented on the forensic service being provided entirely from the public sector. We've looked at the mixed model we have at present. People have argued that, or the question has been raised, to what extent has this mixed model destabilised the criminal justice system? Because firms have gone out of business, the rate of return on capital they're getting and so on is very low. As a result, they can't invest in innovation. And I just wonder if you could comment on that.
So you're right, there have been issues with the sector, and it's right to acknowledge that. I should identify that it's a Home Office lead. The provision of the system and forensic services is primarily a Home Office lead. We in the MOJ are very happy to support that because it supports our courts and tribunals service and impacts us through the justice system. So insofar as they look to review that system, we're very happy to support them in that process.
Can I ask you, apart from giving you support, which I'm sure they welcome enormously, could I just ask you if you have a view on how it's working out?
Well, I know that I understand that the commercial companies are helping to ensure that there is timeliness and speed. So sometimes DNA analysis can now be done very quickly in a matter of days, if not in hours. I know that the Home Office are committed to encouraging investment and welcome that. And as I said, very happy to look at the review that the Home Office does and see where we can assist.
Lord Thomas.
There are a lot of interested people in forensic science, for instance, the judges, in the work they do in the Criminal Procedure Rules Committee, those who've drafted the primers. There's the defence community that has a great interest, obviously the police through the Home Office, the regulator, and of course the CPS. There are a whole lot of bodies, and forensic science is essentially about ensuring that justice is done. Why doesn't the Ministry of Justice have a bigger role, one, and two, why isn't there a strategic body encompassing all these interests that can set out a policy that will remedy the defects in the system?
It's a very good question, and very happy to go away and look at how we can improve on delivering what is, I think, is not only fundamental but growing in importance. I think we do. I mean, I work cross-government in a number of my fields. So in legal aid, I'm working very closely with DWP. In family law, we're working very closely with Family Department of Education, and I work very closely with the Home Office on a number of matters too. And sometimes it is important for one department to lead on an issue. But then, I take the point, and it's a very, very important.
But you probably need non-political strategic leadership. This is the delivery of something key to justice. And you need someone who's accountable for it, because the system for the last few years has actually not really worked since the Forensic Science Service went out of business. Maybe the right thing, maybe the wrong thing. I leave that to the economists. But there's no leadership.
Matthew's very keen to come in.
Sorry, Minister, I was just going to say, Lord Thomas, one of the things that we're talking to the Home Office about as part of their review is what role the Criminal Justice Board could play starting to provide some of that leadership. Now, I think our view is that the Criminal Justice Board has the potential to be a very valuable governance mechanism that brings the whole system together. It hasn't always been when it's been a talking shop, but the chance to sit in one room with the DPP, the Home Secretary, the Lord Chancellor, the head of the judiciary, and try and see the whole system is a chance we want to try and make more of. So that's one of the ways we're offering to play more of a role than we have in the past.
I wish you luck. Having sat on the Criminal Justice Board for about 10 years, it has never been anything other than a talking shop. And so that's why I think you need a non-political person to lead it.
Lord Thomas,
if you take it away, that's all more than I can ask.
I think if I could...
Sounds, Ministers, you would welcome a recommendation from us that will help you
we
progress.
We will look at your report very carefully.
Thank you very much. Lord Hunt.
So this is the question, what are the benefits of the Government Office for Science in providing ongoing communication of advice on science and technology to your respective areas of government? We have actually, in our evidence to the committee, been told by, I think, the person who was number 2 in the Science Ministry, about a large number of scientific studies were actually quite relevant, to forensic issues. And so the question, I suppose, is really how can you improve more the role of science to these issues? And I wonder what is being done about that.
So you're right to identify it's a very important area across government. I mean, in my own department, in the sectors and portfolio that I have, science, technology is a key part. So some of you will be more familiar than others with our court reform programme, which is all about technology and improving the technology through the court system. I heard the previous panel talking about AI. That's something we are looking at very carefully in relation to the disclosure of documents. And our MOJ Head of Research, our Director of Analysis and Data-Driven Department and Culture Change, has committed to working with the Chief Scientific Advisor on a number of subjects. I just had a meeting before I came here with a number of people who deal with data, behavioural science, who are working and have recently liaised with the Turing Institute work that you heard about in the previous session. So yes, I think it's very important that we collaborate together on these areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Lord Mayor?
So just continuing on the science question, what is your department doing to work with UKRI? Because we heard from the previous panel about the need to get a lot more forensic science research done through UKRI, And we've heard from previous witnesses in other sessions that there's a real case for the MOJ and the Home Office to collaborate with UKRI. Can you comment on that?
So one of the areas that we're working on, I just mentioned, is the funding that came from UKRI to the Turing Institute.
Yes.
And that's a project that's looking at how do we use data in our criminal justice system. It's looking at ethical issues around the collection and use of data, which I think is quite an important area.
Yes. No, but that's very interesting to hear, the work with the Turing Institute. But other aspects of forensic science, and it's a very wide field, of course. Is there something that the MOJ should be doing more about other areas of forensic science that you can see need to be investigated?
I'm sure there's always more you can do. As I mentioned, the Home Office lead on the provision of forensic science, and we look at how it is then used in our sphere in the courtroom. But obviously it's a very important area.
I mean, there was work, you will know about the work Julie Maxton has done, the Science and Justice Forum. Do you think there's more to do with the results of her work, or that forum's work?
Yes, absolutely. I have to admit I'm not cited on the detailed recommendations that she made, but our head of data and a data-driven department is in very close conversation with the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Home Office. The way we're currently structured, the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Home Office is leading across government on some of these issues, and colleagues in the MOJ are feeding into that. Clearly, some of the issues that we're most interested in include digital forensics, given the growth in volume, so that's one of the things we're really talking to them about. We're very interested in disclosure, so the subgroup, which is official level and permanent of the CJB, which is driving forward the attorney's review on disclosure, is going through some of these very specific, complex questions.
Because when this committee visited the Turing Institute, it was remarkable, really, the use of statistical and other methods in terms of gauging from all sorts of aspects of social science, including the media, to plug that in, and that all seemed to be quite novel.
So I think that's really important. As I just mentioned before I came here, I just had a meeting with 4 members of my team, a behavioural scientist, head of analytics, and others to talk about how we can use that sort of science in our own systems. I mean, not necessarily in our court reform programme, but also how do people who come to use the court. There's a lot of that we can do in our own systems. So that is absolutely something that we are looking at and doing.
Okay. I got Lord Keker, then Baroness Neville-Jones.
Well, Chairman, thank you very much. Just to come back to the confidence that we can all have and the criminal justice system can have in the science base underpinning the routine use of forensics in the criminal justice system, is the Ministry of Justice content that science base is sufficiently robust as we see new techniques and a much broader dependence upon forensic science in criminal justice? And if not, how is the Ministry of Justice helping the Home Office identify areas of anxiety in terms of that science
Can
base?
you give some examples of what you're thinking about?
Well, in general, what we've heard in this inquiry is that there are areas of well-established science, broad science, underpinning forensic science, and there are other areas where new techniques may be developed, and it's not entirely clear to us how those new methodologies are assessed before they become part of the broader criminal justice system. And I wondered whether the Ministry of Justice has a view on that, or has the capacity to garner that information and then provide insights into those who are commissioning and driving the research agenda in forensic science.
It's a very interesting question, and I think you're asking about forensic evidence rather than data. And I think it's probably fair to say we have, well, at least I have focused more on data than science. So in terms, can I answer in relation to data? We are doing a lot of investigation into the interrogation of AI in relation to data. We are looking at, for example, how interrogation of data is used in commercial cases. The SFO are using AI in their disclosure, and we're looking at that too. It's something that Fiona's been very involved in. There are commercial firms who are developing that. So we are looking at that very closely to see how we can take on board those ideas and develop them. There are issues that arise that are unique to the criminal jurisdiction that we will look at closely. Don't know if you want to add to any of that.
No, I mean, in relation to the Serious Fraud Office, it's right to say that in relation to legal professional privilege, they are using effectively a robot to pull out information based on various search references. And they have a success rate, certainly in one of the bigger cases they've done recently on relating to Rolls-Royce, with over 97% success rate, with the 3% left over going to a counsel or a caseworker to actually manually go through. I'm not entirely clear what exactly. It's millions of pages of evidence should it have been printed out. And equally, the police are looking, we know, at different angles. I mean, again, we're very keen, particularly I think it's Durham Police, I would need to check, where they are using, again, tools to try to get through vast quantities of evidence that simply can't be done by a human being. And again, that's quite interesting from a legal professional perspective.
Manningham Buller has a
follow-on.
Yes, I do. Just to come back to that, of course, one of the questions is around data and analytics and so on. But there's also a more fundamental question, and that relates to how new methodologies for forensic science are introduced.
Yes, and whether do you mean whether they're acceptable?
Robust. Have they been properly tested in science in general? For instance, one would have to introduce a new technique, ensure it was published, peer-reviewed, properly and robustly debated in science to establish that particular technique or methodology were sufficiently robust and applicable.
Yes.
As the Ministry of Justice, is the Ministry content that the foundations, the base of science, driving forensic science, is sufficiently robust for those who participate in the criminal justice system to be confident that if conclusions are reached and decisions are taken, they are done on a firm foundation?
Yeah, so you're right to identify that perhaps there should be a preliminary assessment. But the second answer is, of course, that is the role of the court. So so when people come to the court and assume an expertise without a peer review and without relying on literature, they will, as I said at the outset, have had to have set out the basis on which they have founded their expert evidence. You know, this is my skills, this is the basis of my experience and expertise, and that can be challenged by the other side, by those involved in the case.
I'm sorry to press you on this, Minister, but I think you're still not quite answering the question that we're trying to get at. It's not about data analytics, it's not about what happens in court, it's about the science that is done in our universities with a forensic application which, not maybe this afternoon, but next week, might have an application to the criminal justice system. How does the Ministry of Justice either support the financing of that research or is aware of it? Because we're talking about things for the future, things that are happening now that could have a real assistance for the administration of justice. This is not about data analytics, it's not about the way things are conducted in court.
So I think you're asking a couple of things. One, if you're asking how we're supporting, I think that was your final question to the Minister, and he said there's the funding review coming up. But if you're talking about, I thought you understood, but if you're not, is it appropriate for those matters which might be untested to go to court? I think that's a separate question, which I think it's a good question that we should think about.
It's actually about the science before that stage, the science that may have an application for the administration of justice. Is this something that the Ministry of Justice is thinking of, Department of Justice is thinking of financing, and so on? the science long before the court?
I think that is something we'd be interested to hear your views on, and I know you put it to the previous minister, and he answered by
I think Baroness Neville Jones might be helpful.
Well, I do have a question to ask you. It seems to me, actually, that the money probably lies in the Home Office. And the question I wanted to ask you is the following. Many people would think that the most important function of forensic science in the end is that it should serve the interests of justice. So the question arises as to why it isn't the Ministry of Justice, it's the Home Office that still has the budget. In an ideal world, would you think that this budget's responsibility should actually shift to the Ministry of Justice now that we have a Ministry of Justice? Of course, historically, you're a newcomer. Historically, it's been with the Home Office, but now that your department exists, shouldn't your department actually have the budget?
I'm always in favour of more money to my department. I think it's a question I'd want to think carefully about, but I think coming back to the point that Lord Thomas made earlier, collaboration across government is important. Whoever holds
matters a lot in government, if I might say so.
Sorry.
Who is in the lead matters a lot in government.
It does. We will and do joint bids, support bids that are made by other departments. It is in our interest, for instance, that the CPS works well. It is in our interest that DWP gets decisions right first time. It's in our interest that the immigration decisions are made well, because we are a downstream department at the end of the day. And if those issues are resolved by other departments before they get to us, then our interests are well served. But I'm not saying I don't welcome the decision, the suggestion, but
it is arguable,
want to think about
as things stand, is it not, that in fact it's the criminal investigation side that is more served by the current arrangement?
It is, but the police do quite a lot of that.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So I think only 5% of forensics actually of work that is done in relation to forensics actually ends up in court. So a lot of the work is being done, as you say, at the investigation side.
But I guess that was my question, which is, isn't the danger? I mean, it seems to be either. If you get the gist of where we're coming from, either there needs to be a genuinely joint, independent, strategic leadership across the piece. Otherwise, there is at least the perception, if not the reality, that what forensic science is essentially serving is police forces and part of the criminal justice system, but not the whole system. And I think that's in a sense what it would be helpful to go away and think.
I think it's an important. I do think the criminal justice system, I've learnt in my year in office, is linked so fundamentally with so many other departments. Many of the issues that people raise and criticise the Ministry of Justice for, the Ministry of Justice does not have responsibility for. So when there are errors in court because investigations haven't been fulfilled properly by the police or the prosecution hasn't done its job properly, the Ministry of Justice is often the person who people think have responsibility when we don't. We want to ensure that we work very closely with the Attorney General's office, with the Home Office, with all other departments to ensure that we have a proper and functioning justice system.
Lord Griffiths.
Forgive me if you feel you've already answered this question, but as I listened this afternoon, there's been an awful lot about bureaucracies talking to each other, a lot about some individual issues, relation to UKRI and so on. But the question I'm left with at the end is, the point about forensic science, it's meant to serve the justice system. We've heard that in the past, in terms of forensic science, we were the world leader. Maybe today we're not. But you are in a position as a minister, you talk to other ministers, first of all, in the department. Secondly, you talk to judges. You talk to counsel, whether they're prosecuting defence. You hear feedback from juries and so on. As you assess the overall situation, how good do you think we are? Where are the gaps? And what can we do to make ourselves first rate? Because, frankly, the evidence we've heard, or that I feel I've heard, is that we are not there. And there is a danger of miscarriage of justice because we just don't have the right quality of forensic service.
Well, I think that's the purpose of your report, is to tell us where you think the gaps are.
Yeah, but Minister, you're at the coalface. I'm not at the coalface. I know very little about the law, unlike my colleague on my left.
In terms of the quality of the provision of service, you asked me at the outset whether people could get reports in the legal aid agency or of the view that they can. I heard evidence, read the evidence that Sir Brian Leveson gave, where he referred to the outstanding forensic evidence that he had in a double jeopardy case. So I think we do and can achieve excellence in the forensic evidence that we have before our justice system. And I think one can always do more. We in the Ministry of Justice are happy to do more. We're happy to take on board any recommendations, but I think that we do have a system that can produce, as Sir Brown said, outstanding results.
Okay. Baroness Young and then Lord Borwick.
Lord Griffiths asked my question, so I'm grateful to him for that.
Lord Borwick.
Can I ask about digital forensics and the sheer quantity of information that is coming out of that field, which was mentioned by Mr. Gould earlier? Do you believe that the judges are really on top of this sheer quantity of information? We've heard suggestions of judges saying that a mobile phone should be analysed overnight and the evidence given the following day. The sheer quantity of stuff and is quite daunting to look at the number of cases that it will be involved in the future. Are we doing the right training of the judicial system?
So I think there's more that can be done, because if obviously it's impossible and you need 19 officers over to work every weekend, then perhaps the right orders aren't being made. So there is an element of training which we can do. Well, as I mentioned at the outset, the judges are trained through the Judicial College, but also the Criminal Justice Board is an avenue to identify issues like this. Matthew referred earlier to the work that was being done on disclosure. So following the Attorney General's disclosure review, there is a subcommittee of the Criminal Justice Board that is working and looking at the issues in relation to disclosure and how we can improve those. So I think disclosure and the quantity of data is a real challenge that we need to address. And we need to address it in a number of ways, but one of those ways is through AI, which we are looking at.
Yeah, I understand that, but sometimes I feel that in business you sometimes have to get the next generation of people in to understand a new technology, to actually make the most of a new technology. Is the same feature, do you think that the judicial system is trainable?
Yes.
To get the hang
Absolutely.
of
yes. I think we have some of the finest judges in the world, and our judges are internationally respected for their integrity, their expertise, their intellect. And I think, as I mentioned when I said at the outset, judges as barristers and solicitors are used to dealing with information of various kinds, and their skill is assimilating that information. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to a particular subject within their expertise. So I think they are capable of training.
Good. You mentioned, or your colleague mentioned earlier, that the hourly rate was, I think, £72 outside London.
Outside London, 90.
Outside London.
Yeah.
Is that enough sufficient to, given the enormous competition for people who are at ease with digital forensic evidence, is that enough to recruit the quantity of people that you're going to need for this purpose?
So we have heard, as I'm sure you have heard, that there might be some gaps in the provision of expert evidence. But the Legal Aid Agency say that there are no cases where there isn't the provision that they should, that there needs to be provision that is not being provided at the moment.
And provision of the right quality, rather than of just the right quantity.
Well, I would hope that people weren't being instructed if they weren't of the right quality.
Well,
they have to.
So.
Yes.
And does that imply that you're confident that £72 is enough to actually get the right quality of people? Because it would seem to me to be on the low side of the market price for good quality programmers.
So I think the average for an expert is about £1,500 they get paid overall.
To run a case through?
Yes, that's that.
The
average spend per case is around £1,300. Yeah.
Okay. Lord Thomas.
I just want to ask you a specific question about disclosure. As you know, Minister, in civil justice for a long time, AI and keyword search has been used a great deal to simplify the process of discovery. We were given some evidence that this might be difficult in the criminal context from the defence side.
Yeah.
How are you grappling with that problem? Because if it can't be grappled with, there is the very real problem. And has the Criminal Procedure Rules Committee looked at this, and what is the answer to the points that were raised by two very, very experienced criminal practitioners?
So I'm sure that there are challenges, and I understand the one that you highlight. We are starting, I mean, as Fiona mentioned, they already do AI disclosure in serious fraud office cases.
Yeah, but that's what she was talking about, was the review of documents seized, as I understood her description, of documents seized by the SFA, which might contain with it privileged documents. Well, that's an internal process. What I was interested in was the process, the inter partes process, where we were told, and it's obviously a very serious problem, that if the defence won't agree to a search with keywords or search terms or any other extra, I think your problem is unresolved. I just wanted to know, how is the ministry addressing this?
So
it's very serious.
We are starting to look at this issue, and we'll resolve issues as they arise. I mean, I have been involved in very paper-heavy cases, which were just starting to go sort of online with forms when I was at the bar, and people did agree search terms, although I can tell you they didn't want to at the outset. So I think that it is possibly a journey that we'll need to go down, and obviously justice is paramount. So if we don't end up with a situation whereby documents can be searched in this way, then they will have to be searched in another way. But I wouldn't want to suggest that. I would hope that as as I identified, and as you well know, Lord Thomas, the duties of those representing are to the court and not to their clients, that one should encourage cooperation in what is a very important area.
But the evidence we've received is so serious as the amount of police time that goes on this sort of issue, that it really would be helpful that this was something that was addressed urgently in the light of the evidence given by two very distinguished criminal practitioners. And if a member of our team were able to look at this and tell us what the answer is, it would be very helpful to a major area.
So we are looking at it. We're looking at it in the light of the disclosure review, but it was something technology is an area we have been interested in for some time, and yes, we'll continue to resolve issues as they arise.
I would just add, as we announced in the AGFS consultation response, we are now reviewing all of the different schemes that exist within the criminal legal aid jurisdiction. That includes everything from the police station all the way through to the very high cost cases and everything in between. And that does provide us with an opportunity to continue the engagement that we've started already with very experienced practitioners, who I would just add, I know the committee's heard some evidence from, as you say, very well respected legal professionals, but there are equally separate views that exist where there is
perhaps greater credence given to some of the technology that exists now, and certainly greater some energy, if not necessarily always funding at the present time, energy to explore that further and to engage with us to help us find some of the answers to some of the questions you posed.
Okay, Lord Thomas.
Yeah, it's just very urgent.
Yes, I mean, yes.
And I didn't detect, maybe it's me, but I didn't detect a sort of urgency in addressing this problem.
It is one of our priorities in the sense of, the Attorney General has delivered a report. We are looking at a number of things within a short time scale, and this is it's certainly an area which we consider is very important, and Fiona is actively engaged on it with her team.
Thank you very much. Well, Minister and your colleagues, thank you very much for coming today. I know you have a busy day, but you also have a busy evening coming up, so good luck with it. Thank you indeed, and we appreciate very much your coming. I think we might have put you through a mincer a bit, but that's the nature of the thing. But we are very appreciative, and I hope you'll find our report. It is, we're hoping that will be a helpful report to you. That is our intention, so we hope to receive it well.
Yeah, can I say, I mean, we